So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the call today. We have a fantastic group of individuals already on here tonight, from district leaders, whether long-time serving or recently elected, state assembly members, state senators, and perhaps even our next mayor of New York City. For the sake of keeping this meeting moving forward in an orderly fashion, I do ask that everyone please keep themselves on mute to allow the candidates to speak freely and without interruption. Now, I do want to give everyone the notice that Chairman Meeks is in Washington currently serving as the representative. He's being called into votes. So he'll be joining as much as he can, probably in and out of those votes as they come up. So please bear with me. I wasn't necessarily intending to or expecting to MC this, but I'm going to do my best as I can. So let's get into it as quickly as we can. Our first guest is actually a Brooklyn kid and a Stuyvesant grad. She has spent years literally keeping the city clean, having most recently served as the commissioner of the New York City Sanitation Department and previously as chief operating officer of New York City Department of Environmental Protection. She has fond memories of New York, where kids gathered for stickball in the street and everybody knew each other on the block. I present to you Catherine Garcia. Catherine, the floor
Hello.
is.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you to all of you. I am Catherine Garcia, for those of you who don't know me, and I am running for New York City mayor, but there are a lot of friends on this call. I want to thank the congressman, even though I know he's not here, for gathering everyone together, and all of the Queens Democratic district leaders and state committee members. And I apologize for doing this from my car, but I am spending the day with an 1199 member. And we started early this morning at 6 a.m. And so I've just taken a moment before we go back to her house to do the end of her evening. As you said, I have been accountable to New Yorkers for the last 14 years of my life, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. And if you didn't know my name, you knew my work. You knew that I delivered your water, ensured that the harbor and Jamaica Bay were clean, at DEP, at sanitation, ensured that trash and recycling was picked up, and that snow got plowed. I actually think they did a real bang up job over this past few days. And at NYCHA, I led the real process to transform it on lead abatement and putting in place a new compliance department. I have been called into service, whether or not that was during Hurricane Sandy, where I was the incident commander for DEP, or during COVID, where I delivered 130 million meals. And I have to say, I think I distributed food with a whole bunch of people who are on this call. But as you mentioned, I grew up in Brooklyn. I am part of a multiracial family because both me and two of my siblings of the five were adopted. And we had quite the quintessential Brooklyn. You play on the streets. Your mom wants you to be within calling distance, but don't come back until dinner time. And I want to ensure that every kid who's growing up in the city of New York gets to have that experience, gets to have the experience of a stable home with a roof over your head, with food on the table, with a sense that you can become anything you want to be. And I always had that sense as a graduate of the city's public school system. I always felt that the world was my oyster. And I am running for mayor because we cannot afford another politician who does not understand how to manage this city. It is a management job, and you have to be prepared for it on day one. The role of mayor over the coming years is going to be to rebuild this city. We need to provide the necessary support and day-to-day quality of life investments, clean parks, safe transit, access to fresh, healthy food, reliable childcare to allow you New Yorkers to thrive. That is why the core of my COVID-19 recovery plan is to
I think you muted yourself. Catherine, you muted yourself.
Am I muted now or am I good?
You're good now.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. I guess it's being in the car is a little challenging. But thank you for your patience. Uh, you know, as I was saying, government, when it does its job well, should really be invisible. You should really not have to thank us for ensuring that the streets are plowed or that we're delivering food, because we should get out of your way and allow you to do well in school, allow you to thrive in your businesses. And that is why I'm very focused on ensuring that we reopen our cultural center and all of the things that are going to make New York special again, particularly our restaurants. I am very happy that finally on Valentine's Day, hopefully everyone has a date for Valentine's Day this year so you can go to a restaurant, that those will be reopened, because my sister owns a restaurant and had to close because come November, people were really not showing up anymore. And unlike the current administration, I'm going to have an open dialogue with all aspects of the city, whether or not you're in the philanthropic community or the for profit community or the government community. Everyone needs to have a seat at the table. These are all critical to New York City's recovery. It's going to take all of us to get it done. And I believe that as the next mayor, you need to know that I would be the one to deliver on those critical city services, essential city services, to ensure that we are really moving forward together. As I said during COVID, we don't need another task force of how to do this. When I was responsible for food, I just picked up the phone and called the grocery store owners and said, "What do you need from us?" And they were confusion. What are we supposed to do about social distancing? How do we put up plexiglass in our grocery stores? And we worked it out together. But in terms of my plans moving forward, I know that we need to build more deeply affordable housing, and I plan to build 50,000 units of deeply affordable housing and help legalize accessory dwellings to expand the volume of housing. In education, I know that we need new high schools in the city of New York, but I would keep in place the test for the specialized high schools, but expand new high schools and have it be based on GPA rather than a standardized test. In terms of jobs, we have to be prepared to have CUNY students getting private and public sector jobs, our trade schools being a direct connect. The automotive high school should have opportunities at DOT and sanitation and PD, anyone with a fleet. In transportation, we want to make more open streets permanent and do complete streets and include residential parking permits. You know me as a practical problem solver for the city of New York. And that's what I intend to do, even with the stickiest of problems, which is police reform. With police reform, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We know that every community needs to feel as if they are guardian, if they are their guardians. And I have proposed two things. One, that they be 25, that we make sure that we are holding them rigidly accountable around discipline, and also that they live in the city of New York, and which I know does require state legislative authority. But I hope to garner your endorsement. And let me just close by, congratulating Jim Gennaro. You were the head of the Environmental Protection Committee back when I was at DEP, and I hope that we work together again in the future.
Thank you, Catherine. It was a pleasure to work with you all those years.
Thank you, Catherine, for your vision of New York. Obviously, the city is quite massive. Its needs are perhaps endless, everything from transportation or ULURP, or even recent unionizing efforts in city council. But if you can summarize your entire vision, your entire plan in 10 words or less, can you please do that for us?
Absolutely. It's about growing the city of New York, having there be economic mobility and opportunity for all, with a laser focus on ensuring that we're delivering essential city services while we make long-term investments in climate change.
Wonderful. And something a little bit more fun, perhaps. We all have to know, what's your favorite pizza place in the city?
Oh, Ellen May in Brooklyn. Sorry, in Brooklyn.
That's perfectly all right. We understand. We all like to call our home boroughs the number one of the five. No matter where you come from, it's always the best. Catherine, thank you so much. Everybody, please give a round of applause, I should say, for Catherine for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's great to be here. Have a wonderful evening.
Our next guest hails from the island of Manhattan and has a career spanning of both city and federal government. He's worked on housing issues as Commissioner of HPD in the Bloomberg administration and later as Secretary of HUD in the Obama administration. This tri-Harvard graduate now calls Boerum Hill, Brooklyn his home. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Sean Donovan.
Thank you, Queen. It's so great to be with you. And even though he's not with us, I just have to say how good it feels to be able to say Chairman Meeks. I know I sleep better at night knowing that he is watching over the world these days, unlike the last 4 years. So it's great to be with you all. And I want to just tell you a little bit about me. You probably know, as you heard, that I led housing in this city under Mayor Bloomberg, that I led housing for the country under President Obama, and then oversaw the $4 trillion federal budget. But I became a public servant because I grew up in this city at a different time of crisis. I watched homelessness exploding on our streets as a child. I watched neighborhoods like the South Bronx, Central Brooklyn, so many others literally crumbling and burning to the ground. And that lit a fire in me to go to work on behalf of this city that I love. I started working all across this city right out of school with a nonprofit to rebuild those same neighborhoods I'd seen crumbling as a kid. That includes building in Queens, in Central Brooklyn, in the Bronx, homeownership to build wealth, not just rebuild communities, but build wealth and build a future for so many who had been left behind for so long. That led to a 30-year career at the front lines of housing and homelessness, of racial and economic justice, and ultimately led to 8 years in the Obama cabinet. I know what it means to lead through crisis, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to lead New York at this moment of crisis. I was housing commissioner in the wake of 9/11. I was housing secretary in the midst of the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes. And when Sandy hit our shores, President Obama asked me to go to work, and side by side with Senator Schumer and so many other of our leaders in Congress, like Greg Meeks, I was able to bring $60 billion to this city and work in the Rockaways and so many other communities to rebuild better and stronger. Because no good deed goes unpunished, President Obama then asked me to lead the $4 trillion federal budget, and 3 weeks later, Ebola hit. And there I was in the Situation Room with Dr. Fauci, our military leaders, President Obama, Vice President Biden, making sure an emerging global health threat didn't become a pandemic that cost tens of thousands of New Yorkers their lives. So in this moment, I believe I am a unique candidate that brings together the big, bold ideas for the future of this city with an ability to roll up my sleeves and actually rebuild from this crisis. I've also been there for Queens, whether it was working with Leroy Comrie in the wake as the mounting foreclosure crisis loomed in Queens, to build the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, to be in the Rockaways and so many other parts of Queens after Sandy. And it's why I'm building ideas to rebuild this city, but also to build wealth. And a signature proposal I call equity bonds. It builds on the baby bonds proposal of Cory Booker. Every child born in this city would get $1,000 in an account at birth, and every year up to $2,000, depending on income. That would mean a child born into poverty in New York City would have almost $50,000 when they graduated to put to work for college, to build a business, to buy a home, to build a future in Queens and New York City. Those are the kind of ideas in my campaign of ideas that I want to use to make sure this is not just a city that we rebuild. It's a city that we reimagine to work for everyone. That's why I'm running for mayor. Would love to have your support.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was definitely a lot similar to what I asked for Catherine Garcia. If you can summarize all the needs and all your vision for New York City in 10 words or less or so, what would that look like?
I would say it's a city that works for everyone. We need a mayor who knows how to make the city work. Nobody has managed at the scale and breadth that I have, but we also need a mayor that puts equity first so that everybody has a chance to succeed. I was in Jackson Heights with small business owners the other day, hearing about the concerns they have. I'm the child of an immigrant who grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru, and then came to New York and built a business. We have to make sure this becomes, once again, a city where everybody here, every child growing up in the city, but every child around the world can understand that this is a place of opportunity.
Thank you. Speaking to that opportunity, we do want to ask, what's your favorite borough and why is it Queens?
So you're asking me to pick among my children? Is that as a dad, what kind of question is that? Look, I gotta say, I raised my kids in Brooklyn. I'm here. I do love Brooklyn, but one of the things that I think is unique about me, I didn't just start working in neighborhoods in Queens and around the city last year or 10 years ago. 25 years ago, when I started my career, I started working in every neighborhood in the city to build housing, to revitalize communities. And I understand the communities of New York. One of my big ideas for the city is what I call the 15-minute neighborhood. You all know there are so many places in Queens that don't have decent access to transportation and so many other things. For me, a 15-minute neighborhood means a great public school for your kids. It means access to real rapid transportation, not a two-fare zone that take forever to get to work. It means access to a decent job. It means access to a hospital and healthcare, a park where you can exercise, particularly in a pandemic, and access to fresh food. We have far too many neighborhoods in Queens that don't have that. And so I want to make sure for all my children, all the boroughs, that we are building 15-minute neighborhoods everywhere and prioritizing so many neighborhoods in Queens that have been left behind for too long.
Thank you for that. I definitely didn't mean to put you into a corner. We just love Queens here. We might be a little bit biased, as you could tell by our names. But Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Is there any last second words that you may want to say?
Just that, you want a mayor who's been there for Queens. And I have been, as I said at the outset, again and again, whether it was in the mortgage crisis, in Sandy, building wealth with Bishop Youngblood and so many other community leaders across this city. That's who I've been as a public servant, and that's who I would be as mayor. So would love to have your support.
Thank you again, Sean.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue moving on. I now have the pleasure to present to you yet another lifelong New Yorker. He has roots both in Brooklyn and in Queens, though now he serves as Brooklyn's borough president after previously having served in the NYPD and state senate. He's a CUNY and New York City public school graduate, a retired police captain, and an advocate for healthy living. I give to you Eric Adams. Eric, are you with us?
Yes, let me just navigate my screen. I have one of my assistant names on there, so it's all right. In this new Zoom universe, that's I am not Pragya, if you haven't noticed. That's my deputy campaign manager. So thank you for allowing me to come on.
Thank you, Borough President. You have a few minutes. You can just give a general overview of your vision for New York, your main priorities, to summarize your sort of stump speech, if you will.
Yes, and I would love to always adhere to time restrictions. So please tell me my time so I can set my clock to it, that I adhere to it.
Absolutely. You have about 10 minutes, and then we'll ask one or two more questions after your stump.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And really thanks, all of you in Queens, our county leader, Greg Meeks, Tanique Miller, Adrienne Adams. I like to call her my sister. We share the last name. And for many of you who have walked me around the borough in your particular areas and pointing out particular issues, Councilman Moya the other day was doing the same and communicating with both two very dear friends, District Leader Rosalind and Leslie Spigner as well, and so many others that I have encountered with. You know, Queens has been given a disservice during this mayoral campaign, and I think a big lie. We have heard reported over and over again that there is not a Queens candidate running for mayor. That is not true. I am the Queens candidate. I grew up in Queens, right on 167th Street and 111th Avenue. I'm a Queens boy, you know, born and bred, had a paper route right in Queens. I had to, you know, attended PS 140 Queens, went to IS 8, went to Bayside. I know Queens so well. And I know the people of Queens, and most importantly, the people of Queens know me. My kid brother was a sergeant in community affairs, Bernard Adams, and he's so still well known in parts of Queens for what he has done in his years in the police department. And so this is a borough that's dear to my heart. Mommy is still on 111th Avenue, 167th Street, in the small house that we grew up in. And I know it well on how important the people are and how much you have evolved and continue to evolve as a borough. Let me be clear, and I say this over and over again. Our city is dysfunctional, and we create our crises. And you're going to hear me throughout the campaign trail talk about how the greatness of a city depends on the agencies within the city. And if those agencies are in conflict with each other, they create the crises. We are not aligned and we are not moving as one city. And the inefficiencies of our agencies, they are creating the inequities and the inequalities, and in some cases, the injustices that we witness. And we could turn it around, and I know that. When we look at COVID, many people point to COVID-19 and talk about how it has created so many problems. Those problems existed long before COVID-19. And I saw what dysfunctionality was back in the days when I was a police officer. We knew crime was high, 2,000 homicides a year, almost 98,000 robberies. Every other car had a no radio sign. We used to have Benzie boxes where you would carry your radio out of the car. Those were signs of surrender. But a man named Jack Maple brought a team of us together and told us that we can be safe in the city. We were able to use our computer experience, and we use a real-time system called OLTPS that monitored crime in his city in real time. And we were able to bring down crime and make our city safe. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety. We should never surrender that. And in order to turn around our city, we have to get COVID under control. We have to deal with the real increase in gun violence, and we must grow this city and get our economy back in the right direction. And I can do that. For the last 2.5 years, I have been sitting down with some of the smartest people in this country to talk about things such as education, healthcare, development, economic development, small businesses, growth. We have been meeting every morning from 8 to 9 to 9 to 10, over 250 people talking about turning the city around. We went into overdrive after COVID hit here. I already know who my police commissioner is going to be. I know who my OMB director is going to be. I know who my first deputy mayor is going to be. And I know who my chancellor is going to be. I already put together my team. This is about not just having a plan, but the ability to execute a plan. The mayor of the city of New York will walk into City Hall every day, not knowing if a plane flew into a building or if a plane landed on the Hudson River. The uncertainty of this city takes a special skill, not only competency, but character. I know that skill. Every day that I put on that uniform and walked into a precinct, I didn't know what to expect. I knew I had to be prepared for the moment and put the right team together to execute. This has been an over 20-year journey for me to be the mayor of this city. When I learned how to turn around crime in this city, I went to Bill Lynch, who was the deputy mayor at the time, and I told him we could run our city better, where we won't have 65% of our children not proficient in the African-American community, where we can execute right proposals. He says, Eric, you are a sergeant. I need for you to become a lieutenant so you could be in the command rank. I didn't stop there. I became a captain. He said, you have an associate's degree, go and get your bachelor's degree. I didn't stop there. I went to school at night and got my bachelor's and my master's degree. He said, I want you to get elected to the state so you can learn how to be a lawmaker. I became a state senator. He said, become a congressperson or a borough president. I became the first borough president of color. I followed the path because I know our city was on the wrong path. I'm ready to put us on that right track so we can stop creating the crises in our city. Instead, we can become proactive. Archbishop Desmond Tutu says something that resonates with me. We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. We must take our city upstream. We must make sure children in foster care won't age out at 21 and be more likely not to graduate from high school and to become the victims of crime, allowing them to age out at 26 so that they can go on and have a productive life. We must do dyslexia screening in every school so we won't have 30% of the prison population at Rikers Island become dyslexic. We must make sure that we give adequate support to our small businesses, money that comes from the federal government, and right here, recycle our procurement dollars right in the city of New York instead of allowing them to leave our city. We must make sure our police department is reflective of the diversity of the city by allowing community boards, clergy groups, a local civic and block association to interview precinct commanders to determine if they are the right fit for their community, to make sure that they have a good new ecosystem of public safety that reflects the needs and concerns of the city that we are in. And then we must do something else. We must move our city into a place where we stop talking about education is just from K to 12. It's prenatal through career. We must change the concept of education that our children are more engaged. And we look at ways of preparing our children for the artificial intelligence and computer learning of the future that they must be prepared for. Teaching them critical thinking, teaching them working in groups, communication, financial literacy. Open our schools during after school hours so we can have full engagement like what I have done in Brooklyn with extended use. Utilizing the spaces in our schools to teach those real skills such as carpentry, being a plumber, being an electrician, so we don't again watch our city build up while the future of our children are torn down. And then reformat our hospital system, something we saw during COVID, where you had the lack of hospital beds in Elmhurst and the overpopulation of hospital beds in Manhattan. We need one hospital system where everyone will be treated fairly and receive the same level of services that they deserve and respect in the city of New York. Let me conclude with this, Queens. We've had over 70 years of white collar mayors. I'm a blue collar mayor. All of us know that there's someone in our life that was a blue collar person. They took every dollar they earned and they put food on the table for the moment and invested in our future. That's who I am. That's what my mother did. That's what she instilled in me. I'm going to take your tax dollars and I'm going to treat it the way a blue collar mayor knows how to treat it. We will invest in feeding the people who are in need today, and we invest in our future for tomorrow. We've had enough people treat our tax dollars like they're trust fund babies. It's time for them to treat it like a blue collar mayor would do. I'm not fancy. I was a dishwasher. I worked in the mailroom. I went to school at night. I earned my way through the law enforcement career. I continued to drive and thrive for the people of the city of New York. I wore a bulletproof vest for 22 years and protected your children and families. I'm gonna do it in a blue suit as the mayor of the city of New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Borough President Adams. Just for the quick follow-up questions, I've been asking something similar to all the other candidates before you, but if you can summarize your number one goal, your number one priority for New York, if nothing else goes well during your administration, you could do one thing, what would that thing be?
I am going, and I really want all of you to do this today when you finish this forum. Education. I want you to go online and I want you to Google first 1,000 days of life. We have education wrong. The first classroom is in a mother's womb. In 4 weeks, a child has 10,000 brain cells. In 24 weeks, that child has 10 billion brain cells. If we do not make sure mothers, when they're carrying their babies, have the right nutrition, that baby is going to be born with almost cognitive issues, learning issues. We're thinking the problem is to fix education in the 3rd grade, in the 1st grade, in the 2nd grade. That's too late. I'm going to change education in the system, and we're going to make sure we stop the disjointedness of education. It's going to be prenatal all the way through career, and we're going to change the experience of education. If we don't get that right, we'll never turn our city around, and we will have a perpetual group of people who will be left out of this city. And that's not going to happen under my watch.
Wonderful. And the last follow-up question, we all know that you've become quite a healthy person, exercising in your own office and everything, but what's your favorite health food spot where we all got to go?
A health food spot, a great vegan restaurant up in Harlem is called the Uptown Vegan. You would eat there and you would not even know that you were eating vegan food. I love it every day. And, you know, it's about health as well. You know, my 82-year-old mother is no longer on her insulin. Mom is no longer taking those 9 medications because she decided to change her diet and lifestyle. And, you know, mom has 6 children. She loves them all, but she adores me. I'm her favorite child.
Thank you so much, Eric. Again, everybody give him a round of applause for joining us tonight and for your vision.
Yay! From Rockaway, we love you.
Boy in the house.
Rockaway's the absolute best.
Cambria Heights in the house.
Bayside High.
Queens Village.
IS8 in the house. All right.
Thank you.
Adelaide Park in the house.
Well, I'm loving this.
Jackson Heights.
I'm going to have to mute everybody. Thank you.
All the Queens.
Jamaica.
Flushing.
Okay, so we'll be moving on. Our next candidate.
That's Rack City.
Our next candidate brings our attention back across the East River as he hails from Washington Heights over in Manhattan, having a long career in public service, including serving on the Community Planning Board at the age of 16. He's also served the city in the Assembly as borough president and now as comptroller. The New York Times has described him as a leader committed to the principles of good government. Ladies and gents, Manhattan's own Scott Stringer. Scott, are you with us?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Queens Democrats. Thank you, Congressman Greg Meeks, for inviting me today. And I'm really excited to get on the Zoom today and exchange ideas with all of you. And look, we can't come out of this recovery without all of us at the table. If you think back to February of 2020, pre-pandemic, the unemployment rate in the city was 3.4%. Over the preceding 10 years, we had added 970,000 jobs to the economy. And once COVID hit, the unemployment rate went from 3.4% to over 20%. And those 970,000 jobs, we lost 900,000 within 30 days. This was not the 2008 recession. This wasn't even like Hurricane Sandy or 9/11. This was akin to the Great Depression. This was bread lines and food lines, and so many of you who are so active in communities, you saw it all so well, the challenges people felt over the last many months. So I'm running for mayor because I believe that I have the vision and the skills to build our city back. The future of our city depends on what has always been our value proposition, that the mayor can build the best education system, that we can make sure that we have great parks and affordable housing, that we can make it possible for every immigrant to come to our city and thrive. And in this campaign, I know that talk is cheap. And that's why I put out detailed plans to help our small businesses, 25-point plan that would help build online platforms and businesses, move them outside in April and May so that we can take advantage of warm weather and give them a fighting chance to make it, but also make sure that there's tax credits and tax incentives to move to hollowed out commercial corridors that are way too prevalent in Queens. I have a plan for workforce development, offering free tuition at 2-year CUNY schools so that we can upskill our workforce and prepare our kids for the new jobs that will be coming to our city, the green economy jobs, the IT jobs, the telehealth jobs. We've got to rebuild this economy through thoughtful programs. I also want to make sure that we build out a 21st century transportation system. Look, the city doesn't control the MTA, and it shouldn't, but we do control the streets in this city, and we have to build out a bus network that recognizes where the jobs are, where the new economic hubs are. It's not in the Midtown Central Business District, I'm sorry to say, but these are the hubs throughout Queens and Brooklyn, and we have to prepare our system, our transportation system for that. I also want to make sure that we build a real affordable childcare system for all. I'm proud to support legislation and work with Jessica Ramos on a plan called NYC Under 3 to triple the number of childcare slots for our children, to make sure that all children can afford to be in childcare. 80% of brain development occurs in 0 to 3. But look, folks, plans aren't enough. It's going to take real government and political skills to get things done. And no one in this race matches my experience. I'm a former assembly member. I know we have to reset the relationship with Albany, and no one's going to steal my lunch money on the way to Albany fighting for the city. I'm a former borough president. I have real experience in land use and zoning. I know what it's like to create community-based planning and make sure that communities have a say in the future of their neighborhoods. I know how to grow the tax base while protecting our communities. And as controller, I've done the hard work. I've managed a $240 billion pension fund. It's the 4th largest in the United States, 14th largest in the world. I fixed the back office to make sure that our retirees would be safe. But I also did the big work as being the city's chief financial watchdog. I audited City Hall. I looked at financial management. I know where the bodies are buried and where the money's being wasted. And I believe that I can play a role as mayor to bring the city back through the lens of my experience. I've also done the big work in the pension system. I'm proud to tell you, working with our labor trustees, we have now divested $4 billion in fossil fuels. It's a historic moment for our country and for our city. And look, most importantly, the job of the next mayor is going to be how we tackle the inequalities laid bare by the pandemic. My mom in April died in a Bronx hospital. She died of COVID. EMS workers took her to the hospital, and I never got to see her again. Many of you know her. She's a former district leader. My stepfather, Carlos Cuevas, is the city clerk, worked with many of you over the years. But I remember the night she died talking to her doctor. The doctor told me that this is not a virus, this COVID virus, that only inflicts pain on people in their 80s. This is a virus that has hurt in the most vulnerable communities, in Black communities and Latino communities, where people in the Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx live. Many people died who were in their 50s and 40s because we managed people's health disparities. We didn't do anything to really solve them. We cited too many bus depot stations in communities and peaker plants. And we have to have a new view of land use and zoning and how we're going to redirect funding to our most vulnerable neighborhoods. And I believe that we can get that done. I'm ready on day one to be mayor. And for me, this is about making sure that we build the greatest city in the world. You know, I'm a W-2 employee. Many people know I have served a long time in government. And so I don't have any real money in the bank. My wife and I do okay, but we don't really have anything to leave the kids. But here's what I'm going to leave my kids. I'm going to leave them the greatest city in the world. And I'm going to do that for your kids and your grandchildren. And I'm going to do it for the kids who are in public housing who don't have internet access, and the kids who are in homeless shelters that don't have a remote learning device, and the kids who are going to need the extra help as it relates to mental health illness. And I'm going to rebuild the city through the lens of what's best for the people in this city. Many of you know that I take this job very seriously. And the job of rebuilding the greatest city where I was born and raised is something that I think about a lot. So I wanted to come on tonight and help make my case. It's great to be here with all of you. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Thank you very much, Queens.
Thank you very much, Comptroller. We do have a couple of questions. One that we've been asking most of the candidates, or rather all the candidates so far, to really summarize the full vision. You spoke just now for close to about 10 minutes, and obviously the city is quite large with a lot of needs. But if you can name one single priority and how you would go about attacking that single priority, what would it be?
Well, let me do this. We have to address the three crises in the city. We have an economic crisis. I talked a lot about how we rebuild the city. We have to rebuild the economy different. In other words, we have to reopen the economy differently than we closed it, and I outlined that. We have a healthcare crisis, and we talked a lot about that. But we also have a social justice crisis. We need to make sure that how we ensure that we have one standard of justice in the city, whether it's police reform or allocating resources in a different way to help our struggling communities. When you put that all together, it's going to take experience and a plan and an implementation, because again, I believe that we have an opportunity to do something big and different if we plan responsibly. And that's what I'm going to try to do as mayor.
Wonderful. And just to have us get to know you a little bit better on a personal level, what's the book that you're reading most currently? What's sitting on your nightstand? What's keeping your mind fresh?
So I just stumbled upon a book about a candidate for mayor in 1977. The woman running for mayor. Let's see if any of the pundits know who I'm talking about. But there's a great book on Bella Abzug that I'm actually reading now. You know, many people may not know this, but Bella is my cousin. It's how I got involved in politics, campaigning for her when she ran for Congress. I realized I'm in the book, but you know, which is kind of cool. That's what I'm reading. So I'm kind of reliving the 1977 mayor's race, which is kind of crazy. When I'm not reading that book, I am reading just about every kid book with my kids at night. So that's the reading.
That sounds great. Well, Comptroller Stringer, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, please give him a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Joining.
Better days, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So this will bring us to our next guest. She's a lawyer, professor, and civil rights activist. She has most recently served as the chair of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and her legal career has spanned working in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, and the Open Society Institute. You might have seen this two-time Ivy Leaguer on MSNBC, or maybe just walking around Brooklyn with her two daughters. I present to you Maya Wiley. Maya, are you with us?
I am. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for that introduction. I feel like that I will not bore you with my resume now, but it is a pleasure to be with you. And look, I am running to be the next mayor of New York City as someone who, as you've just heard, have spent the last 30 years of my career fighting for racial justice. And I've been doing it as a change maker in several different ways, which you already heard. But central to that is how I was raised and how I got called to this moment because of that, where I was raised in that experience, which was being a child of activists in the civil rights movement at the forefront of the economic justice movement, but living in a Black neighborhood as a young girl and going to the neighborhood, segregated, Black, overcrowded, underfunded public school, and having my best friend Charlene, who lived around the corner, and who was my best friend in the classroom and out of the classroom. And we lived in houses. This was in Washington, D.C. But we all rented. And her mother was a cashier at the grocery store. And one day I couldn't find Charlene, and I could always find Charlene. And after looking and running around the neighborhood and looking everywhere I knew to look and not being able to find her mama at the grocery store, I went home defeated and confused. And my mother had to explain to me the landlord had upped the rent and her mother couldn't pay it despite the long hours that woman worked. And I knew how long, because she was always at the grocery store. And I also knew how poor they were because I knew they didn't have enough food to eat. And it destroyed my world. And I started watching all my neighbors disappear. And I say that because that was a big part of my experience and some of my earliest experiences that made me come to Columbia Law School to be a civil rights lawyer. I was proud that I had the opportunity to work on everything from education funding for our public schools in Louisiana to fighting to save maternal and child care beds in Harlem, to, yes, going to the US Attorney's Office because it was an opportunity to try to bring the weight of the federal government to civil rights enforcement. And I switched to the policy side because at the end of the day, everything I was doing, everything that I was fighting for as a litigator was to change policy, because it is our policies and our laws that shape our opportunities and also sometimes continue our challenges, particularly as communities that have been underinvested in for far too long. So I did switch to the policy side and did the jobs you've already heard about, but it brought me after 25 years, including founding the Center for Social Inclusion. And our mission was to dismantle structural racism. And that's what we called it. That I walked into City Hall as the first Black woman to be counseled to New York City mayor, and proudly, because I knew after all this work that it's city government that touches our lives directly. And that it is city government that can be transformational for people, because we touch everything from education to jobs to housing to quality of life issues like public safety and sanitation, all of it. And that I also knew, having been doing what Shirley Chisholm said, right? She said, if you can either whimper and complain on the sidelines, or you can make progress by implementing ideas. And so I went in order to have the incredible opportunity of implementing ideas. And I was proud of what I was fortunate enough to get to lead in City Hall, everything from getting women and minority-owned business contracts up from 500 million when I walked into City Hall, was handed a program that had no budget, had no staffing. And in 1 year, we got it up to 1.6 billion. And we matched it the second year. And I laid the foundation for what is now the Mayor's Office of MWBE. Never existed before. But even more importantly, showing government it could do things it never thought of doing before. Because I'd worked on digital equity issues before city government. And so the mayor said, you get universal broadband. And I said, great. I have no idea how to do that. Because if we're being honest, if we're doing something bold and transformational, it's because we haven't done it before. And government had never done it before. So I partnered with a bunch of folks from the private sector, from the not-for-profit sector, from within government, got government working with itself. And I created a plan and found the revenue, argued for and won the revenue. And we got every single apartment in Queensbridge houses, every single unit, free broadband. But here's the thing. I also saw how it failed. And after 2.5 years, the yellow brick road turned into the red brick wall, and I voted with my feet. And I didn't do it because I didn't love government, but I did do it because it was becoming clear to me that I could get more done outside of government than in, like becoming the chair of the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, which many people don't understand is actually a volunteer position. It's not, you can't work for city government to do that job. And that's a good thing. But that we finally got Daniel Pantaleo's case over to the police department and got him charged. And that's what finally got him off the force. And I could only have done that if I left. But all of that just comes around to when after after these years and being on MSNBC and commenting on how horrible Donald Trump was, but also looking and seeing how ineffective our own city government was at delivering for our people in ways that were going to change our lives. So this would stay a city that has all of us, no matter what we look like, no matter where we live or how much we earn, whether we have big bank accounts or no bank accounts at all of what has always been so rich about New York, including that we speak 800 languages, that if we're going to not just hold on to that, because we must, to recover what we love, but also fix what was broken before COVID struck, because none of it is surprising. Every single time we have a disaster, it's the same folks that are hit hard. It's the same lessons on racial inequality. It's the same lessons around immigrants being cut out. It's the same lessons around the ways in which we're far too unaffordable and far too many more people are struggling. Same story, different crisis, not something we have to tolerate, and certainly something that in a city I love and am not leaving, that I'm not leaving without doing everything in my power, including be the leader that makes sure our government pays attention to every last one of our communities and actually gets it done, and done with dignity, and done in partnership, and done to ensure our homeowners stay homeowners, and done to ensure that our renters can afford the rent, and that our jobs are decent, and that we have quality of life, and that our schools recognize all our children as excellent. That is why I'm running for mayor, because I believe it takes someone who's not going to take the path of least resistance because they're worried about their next political job, but someone who's going to beat a path of partnership to prosperity like none other this city has seen, because we're going to lean into this crisis to do more than recover. We're going to reimagine together. Thank you.
Maya, thank you so much for all of that. I think it's no surprise to anybody on this call or anybody running for mayor that this city's quite large. We've gotten a lot of questions from folks on this call, whether they covered transit and transportation, land use, affordable housing, medical care, obviously with the pandemic going on, some really big issues, but even sometimes often forgotten things like predatory scams or LGBTQ funding and such. So it's a lot that's going to be on your plate. If you can summarize to one bullet point, your number one goal, if all else fails, the one thing you're going to be pushing for more than anything, what would it be? I know I'm summarizing a big job, but.
Well, look, I appreciate it. And, there's obviously more than one, and several of them are big, but I will summarize it to this one. And it is a public position I've already put out there, because it is structural, because it is comprehensive in many ways, and because it is bold. And that's New Deal New York. So we are going to have a new deal for New York. We're going to spend $10 billion in capital construction dollars, and we are going to create 100,000 new jobs. We are going to have local targeting hiring so that our communities that have been hit by COVID, who had far too high unemployment rates before COVID struck, who've had the highest death rates to COVID, are going to be an active part of the recovery. But it's also more than that. In addition to how it helps get our economy stimulated, which has got to be a big part of job one, that it does it in a way that invests in our communities that have for far too long been disinvested in. Because I'm not telling you what the projects are right now, because we're going to have a New Deal czar, and that's going to be a direct report to me, but it's because we're going to partner with communities on the capital projects that solve our problems. In other words, in addition to stimulating the economy and creating good jobs and procuring from our women and minority-owned businesses and our small manufacturers that are right here in New York, we're going to say, and I've heard this in Southeast Queens, for example, where the community's been fighting for a community center, we can say, okay, we'll build a community center with these funds. Or when we have communities, affordable housing, critically important. And we have to build it more for very low and extremely low income folks. We have to solve homelessness. We can do so much more. That's solving a problem. Flood zones, 66% of our people who are low income and people of color are the people who are 66% of people in flood zones are low income and people of color. And so when we're talking about climate justice, and when we're talking about a Green New Deal, We have the ability to do those capital projects that are in a Green New Deal vein, but they're also solving the vulnerability that exists because communities of color have so often been pushed to the margins. So we're going to be able to do, again, more than not just stimulating our economy, because that's important, but in ways that multiply the beneficial impacts of how we're spending our dollars on multiple problems that we have. And that's the way I'm going to approach government and leadership, and in partnership with communities.
That sounds great. So for our final question, we always try and get a chance to get to know you better on a more personal level. Just thinking about the job of mayor stresses me out and makes me want to go eat like a giant bag of chips, because that's my guilty pleasure. What would yours be? What are you going to be de-stressing on?
Well, I mean, can I say more than one thing? Because I exercise. I have to stay sane. I usually run and run outdoors, and I love running outdoors, and it's almost meditative for me. But I have to combine that with eating chocolate, and I can eat more chocolate when I run. So I'm going to say eating chocolate and running.
We'll take that. We'll take that. Maya, thank you again for joining us today, or tonight, I should say. It's been a pleasure. Everybody, please give a round of applause to Maya Wiley.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you. Yes. So unfortunately, our next guest was not able to join us. You may have seen on the news recently reported, Andrew Yang. He unfortunately did contract COVID and has been instructed by his doctors to rest. So we hope to see Andrew back on the campaign trail running around New York City shortly, and that he recovers speed very quickly. But at this moment, I do want to actually introduce our original MC. He's back from saving the country, quite honestly, and putting it back on the right track. Chairman Meeks, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Antonio. Let's give Antonio a great round of applause for the job that he's doing.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to just try to fill in a little bit, and then Antonio, you're going to go right back and take us through with the rest of the candidates. Such a great job. I had to run the vote because we have this big bill that we're voting on today. It's the budget, trying to get the stimulus package through so that we can help our folks, bringing in another $1,400 stimulus. Also making sure that we have city and state aid, that many of our members I know from the city council and the state assembly, the state senate are anxious for us to get done. Make sure that we extend unemployment, to make sure that we get money for our small businesses. All of that is in this budget. It's the president's $1.9 billion, $1.9 trillion package. So we hope we're gonna vote on the budget today, but we look like we may have to do it through a process called reconciliation if none of the Republicans on the Senate side chooses to come with us. So we're fortunate that we now have our own U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer as the majority leader, and they've got that all worked out where Democrats now control all of the committees on the Senate side. That deal is done. So we may be here, from what I'm told, till Saturday voting to get all of it done, because the fierce urgency of now is upon us. But I want to thank, I've just been looking, I guess I got in at the tail end of Borough President Eric Adams. I've been checking my texts and my email, and I see that many of you have been watching your responses, have been very engaged, and I'm so pleased when I look at the number of participants here this evening. We are at 234, which is fantastic. And I think that it's been very informative. And we hope to have dialogue and conversation going back and forth on the mayoralty as we did. But I think one of the things that I also want to do at this juncture is let's congratulate Jim Gennaro, our newest member of the city council. Jim won in a big day last night. It even helped, as me trying to look as the county chair. Look, did not know what's going to happen with ranked choice voting. He won by such a margin that did not come in. But I also want to thank those that ran in that race. Our own district leader, Nita Jane, who did an excellent job. She did herself proud, raising the issues, etc. So we had a lot of Dilip Nath. We had a number of individuals who are very close to our organization. And what we know is that sometimes you are friends and you have these races. The people in those districts make those decisions. And then we try to come back as an organization, come back as a team. That's what this is all about. It's like, for example, in sports, you can get traded. And sometimes, you're playing against one another and it's tough. And then once the game is over, you come back and we work together. So I want to, congratulate all of the candidates that ran in that race and look forward to working with Jim as a member of the city council again and working with the delegation. I think that's good. But so let's give all of the candidates in the 24th Assembly District a round of applause for the great job that they did. So I really appreciate each and every one of them. It's a great thing in trying to look at the quality of the people that we have of the Queens County organization. I think that it was exhibited initially by this race. And, we have another one that's coming up and everybody's watching to see how it works in Queens. That's, there's no accident that Queens is always watched and looked upon to see how we do because others follow what we do. And that's a tribute to all of you that's on this call. So with that, I know what I want to do is coming up, which is very important. We've got to talk about 2 borough-wide civil court judges that were coming up, and we're going to be looking and talking to you. And we've got folks that we've been talking to, so we're going to have to present that to you. But also what's very important coming this June, along with the city council races, is our borough president's race. And I want to stress that, tremendously. The borough president's race is tremendously important. And we've got the very best borough president currently. He has been working diligently. Some may have seen that on one of the calls we just recently had, I described him as the hardest working borough president of all, following the words of, when I grew up, there was a singer named James Brown. He said he was the hardest working man in show business. Well, the hardest working borough president in all of the land is our Donovan Richards, going from one end of the borough to the other. And so I would just ask all of you that if you see an opportunity to invite and to make sure that our borough president has all of the information in the various communities of which Queens represents. We are the most diverse borough, and he has exemplified that by creating a most diverse office in the borough president's office. So I think Donovan is on, and so since we're waiting for our next.
Hey, Alex.
And
how's it going?
Good. But I think we're still waiting for our next person. Is that right, Antonio?
Yes, that's correct. He'll be on in a few minutes.
The borough president, if he's still on the line, to come on up and say some words and let us know what's going on in the borough, our great borough of Queens. Donovan Richards.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Give me 1 second. I'm just getting this camera together. All righty, I think I'm good. Hopefully I'm clear. But how y'all doing? Good to see you, Congressman. Always doing great work in Washington, D.C. And so proud of the work you've been doing there. I'm getting ready to actually hop on a call in Long Island City regarding some streetscape stuff going on. But it's really been, I don't have to tell many of you a challenging time for Queens. But I think I'm starting to see, I feel like there's some sunlight at the end of this tunnel with the vaccination coming, and we're obviously fighting to make sure that there's vaccine equity around the borough. We launched our small business grants program, which has been a $17 million grants program through the New York Mets with EDC I was very happy last week to be out in Jackson Heights. And one of the things that's great about this program, Congressman, and everybody on this line, is that it prioritizes the areas that were hit hardest during the pandemic, which is very important because we know there were pockets of the borough that were hit the hardest. So I was very happy to be out last week in Jackson Heights and in Corona with Assemblymember Catalina Cruz, making sure businesses were aware. We're going to work our way down to Far Rockaway and then some other business corridors, as well as we work to make sure that we keep our businesses afloat. And then, you know, healthcare and community boards, you know, has been something we worked on as well. So I urge everybody, and I'll just stress this tonight, February 19th is our deadline for community board applications, and we digitize the process. So you can literally apply online now rather than having to send it in by snail mail. So we urge everybody to get their applications in. And one of the things we're stressing is making sure that the demographics are reflective of our diversity in Queens. I'll just end on, listen, we have another election coming up. Many of you were here for us the first time. I feel really confident that we're going to succeed in the next election as well. Just this week, we were endorsed by the UFT. We also were endorsed by CWA 1180, and I anticipate many more endorsements coming down the line as well. So let's finish this up strong. I think we've started, we've shown we're ready to get to work. The engine is roaring. There's gas in the tank, and we're hitting the ground running. And I know we can do this and keep Queens strong and build on the foundation that we've done, leaving the city council, as the congressman alluded to, for the entire borough. So it's so great to see so many of you tonight, and look forward to the work ahead, and want to thank you for holding this forum, because, you know, we have to ask every mayoral candidate what they're going to do on fair share, right? And Queens has not got its fair share when you talk about school seats and infrastructure, the budget. You know, these are all things that are going to be key as we move out of this crisis in which Queens was the epicenter in the first place. So thank you, Congressman, for hosting this. Look forward to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. So y'all should know also that we're going to do this with our comptroller candidates coming very soon. We've got one from Queens. I want to let sure everybody understands that. So we'll have a further conversation in that regards. But I know that, and he's a dear friend of ours. So we'll make sure that happens very shortly. We're trying to set that up. That's coming soon.
It's 6:30.
Let's do this. I know we've got several. I think that we are about, things have been moving so well, and Antonio has been doing so great that we are right on schedule, and our next candidate is not due for another 10 minutes. But I think that this was good. This could be an informational session for us all. And I think that the senior member of the city council is with us. And maybe she can just give us an update real quick on what's going on there. And Karen Kosowitz, because I'm seeing how people are quick on their feet. So they don't know that I'm going to call on them. So everybody's got to be ready. Is Karen on the line?
Here I am. I am here.
Great.
I am here. I'm enjoying listening to all the candidates. Excuse me, I have a cold, so my voice is froggy. City Council is very, very busy. We're doing a lot of work. A lot of legislation is being passed, and we're going to continue to do that. Many of us, especially in Queens, are term limited. I think there are 3 to 4 people that will be left, and the rest of us will be term limited. So we're working to get legislation done and do a good job for our county and our city. We're going into budget. We're going to be having budget hearings at the end of this month. And we have a lot of people that are signed up to talk. Everybody needs money. We're not sure how much money we're going to have to give out, but we're going to do our best like we have always done. And I look forward. I love my colleagues in the city council, especially my Queens colleagues. And if anybody's on from another borough, don't take an exception. But I love my Queens colleagues. I grew up with most of them. And I look forward to making Queens proud of the city council.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. I don't know who got the seniority between our two senators that I see that we have more on, between Senator Connery and Senator Adabo. So why don't we give each of them 2 minutes or so to tell us what's happening in the New York State Senate, starting with Joe Adabo.
Thank you, Congressman. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is safe. Congressman, really appreciate you and your team putting on this mayoral forum. I think it's great. And thank you very much. You know, as the Congressman alluded to, my colleague, Senator Comrie, we are just on the cusp of starting our budgetary process. Our budget hearings have begun, and we are facing a double barrel of budget cuts and obviously service cuts if we don't get the help that we need from the federal government. So Congressman, thank you very much for your efforts there as well. And we are looking at a shortfall of upwards of $17 billion shortfall in roughly $180 billion budget. So we all want to go back to the districts and not talk about deep cuts to healthcare during a pandemic or deep cuts to education. We want to talk about how we worked at protecting these services for our middle-class families, our veterans, our seniors, our children. And so we are also looking at, you know, what revenue options are out there. And as you can tell, in a very dire need for revenue, we get to be very creative. So I asked all to weigh in on whatever being proposed in terms of revenue for our state. But these are tough times. And so, like I said, only by working together do we get through tough times. So again, I look forward to working with everyone. And now I'll hand it off to my good friend, Leroy Comrie.
I don't, Joe pretty much covered everything. I don't want to be repetitive. So Senator Dabo did an excellent job of explaining what is happening. We would just invite anyone to look at the hearings that are happening now online. And also, if you have any ideas for revenue enhancements, so please let us know. Or if you have any ideas that can show that we can save some money by doing things better and handling the state in administration of any agency, please share that information with us also. But the hearings are ongoing and we welcome your input online. As you know, the Capitol is closed. It has been closed since the pandemic. So you can't come up to Albany, but we are available virtually to talk with and meet with folks, which we're doing on a regular basis. Thank you, Chairman Meeks, for putting this opportunity together for all of us. And it's good to see folks that haven't seen in a while. So thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. You know, what you just mentioned is the same thing here. I'm here in Washington and virtually it's a fortress now. No tourists, nobody, fencing all around just as it was during the inauguration. It's almost an impenetrable, what we call like the green zone when I visited Afghanistan. Nobody in the halls, nobody's allowed in. It's just regular. It's unbelievable. The fact of the matter is now, because of some of our Republican colleagues who refuse to go by regular order and the rules of the House, we even have to go through magnetometers getting in. Just members, you know, getting on the floor to go on the floor to vote because there's supposed to be no guns allowed on the floor. And some said that they will, and that's been a big fight there. So it just seems a little weird here today. And I believe the senior member of the assembly that I see, and I'm going to call on some other folks for both the assembly and the city council also. So y'all get ready. Y'all don't know who I'm going to do, but I believe the senior member is none other than my good friend from Long Island City, the Honorable Kathy Nolan. Kathy?
Yeah, it's so great to be here. So great to be here. We're actually all of us are juggling as you are. So many. I have another tablet here watching the conference. As Senator Dabo and Senator Comrie said, we're doing budget presentations right now. And you know, I really appreciate you having this forum. I actually had not had the opportunity to hear some of the candidates speak before, so it was very good. You know, personally, can't wait to get a haircut, but otherwise hanging in there on Zoom like everyone else. You know, do miss the hubbub of Albany. I mean, it's hard, you know, it's always been so interactive, but I really appreciate these opportunities through Zoom for us to get together. We did pass a bill today to allow people to take 4 hours from their employer to go get the vaccine shot. We also, you know, have worked with the Senate on a number of other bills. You know, the Assembly usually looks to raise revenue on the wealthy. And I expect that that will be part of the conversation going forward. But I know Senator Dabo is talking about sports betting and other things. And many people know I've been a long time opponent of gambling, but I think under the circumstances, we're going to have to look at all kinds of things that we never looked at before. And so we're going to have to see what the final package is, because we can't have cuts in healthcare. I'm very happy that thanks to so many people, and Gregory, you in the Congress, we've been able to really fill some of the gaps, especially in healthcare, so that like in Western Queens, the floating hospital is functioning very well with vaccines, or in the Ridgewood end, Wyckoff Heights Hospital is functioning very well. We have a small clinic on Anjanok Avenue that's functioning very well. So we're going to keep pushing ahead, but the road is not going to be easy. So just best wishes to everybody. I'm going to be continuing to work on paid family leave expansion and a few other things like that. And of course, education always near and dear to my heart. We're still pushing to get some of our high schools to have more opportunities to interact with LaGuardia Community College and things like that. But good to see everybody, and great to be here for a mayoral forum. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
For Ridgewood.
And, you know, in June, we still have, you know, the city council is running, and we only have 2 members of the city council that's running for reelection that's not term limited. So we've got to make sure we don't take anything for granted, stay focused on that and those races. So I want to call on my friend who just took over a big chairmanship and have done a number of hearings recently, making us all proud from Queens County. Let's hear from, let's hear about her campaign and about her committee. Councilwoman Adrienne Adams.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Wow, it is so great to see everybody in this audience tonight. So many folks, very, very impressive. And it's always good to hear from the candidates. So I'm just going to encourage everyone, every chance that you have, every opportunity that you have, please hop on a forum, hear from the mayoral candidates, and, you know, and let's assess. So as the congressman said, I am going to just a few people on the New York City Council, on the new New York City Council, I should say, and I am the new chair of the Public Safety Committee. I was actually just on the phone with the Times, who they're breaking some news tonight. James Coble is, if you all have followed, James Coble, that is the individual that did the racist rants a few weeks ago. We held the hearings a couple of months ago on that behavior. Anyway, he has just been fired. And that was my first question in my hearing a couple of weeks ago. All I want to know is whether or not this person has been fired. So we just broke the news that he's been fired. We are right now in the Public Safety Committee focused on police reform. There's a mandate from the governor to the city, actually to the mayor's office, that there must be police reform. There must be a police reform plan given to the governor by the beginning of April. So that's my focus right now, leading the committee in enacting police reform. So my next hearing is going to be on February 16th. And we will, you know, continue in our quest for true police reform, transparency. As far as Southeast Queens, wow. We're still, you know, everything for us is always a fight. So we're still in the fight. We were in the fight for COVID testing, and now we're in the fight for COVID vaccine equity. And we're doing that right now. And I'll share this and then I'll stop. Constituent services is everything, as we know, to all of us in this world, in this realm of responsibility. I spoke with an 80-year-old woman today in Richmond Hill, and I was going to drive her to a testing site myself to get vaccinated, but there's no vaccine. So that's what we do. That's what we're fighting for. And we still have to make sure that our residents are taken care of. Hopefully the supply will come back in, and hopefully the people in hotspots like mine in District 28 will be prioritized finally. But for those of you that know, we take care of our constituents, and I was ready to go to her house, put her in the car and bring her somewhere, but there was nowhere to bring her. So we'll keep figuring this out. We'll keep working for our constituents, and we'll keep making it do everything that we were put here to do. I feel blessed to do this work. Wake up every day on purpose with a purpose. So good to see you all. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And our last but not least, our other council member. So we got to get our vets in that we got to get reelected. I want to make sure we hear from him before I turn it back over to Antonio. Francisco Moya.
How are you, Congressman? Good to see you. How is everyone? Always tough to go after my dear sister, Adrienne Adams, you know. My committee is not that exciting, the zoning and franchising. We just spent a couple of 10-hour hearings doing a lot of rezonings here in the city. But I just wanted to say what a wonderful opportunity to get together with all of you and hear a lot from the candidates that are running for mayor. You know, Queens cannot be neglected, and our positions that deal with affordable housing, to rezonings, to policing matters, these are the critical moments for us to come together as a county to really express what we want to see in this next administration that's coming in. And the only way that we can do that is by standing together, holding folks accountable, including us who are up for re-election as well, on the things that, you know, we have set out to do. You know, I'm very proud of the work that we've done at the City Council. We have dealt with an incredibly difficult budget. We have a $10.9 billion deficit, and yet we are still trying to fight to ensure that we are dealing with the food disparities that exist in our communities. COVID really took over the city, but I was at the epicenter of this here in Corona and in Elmhurst and in Jackson Heights. We were ground zero for this pandemic, yet we still come back strong. We're making more investments into Elmhurst Hospital, bringing in the resources that we need, and we're fighting at City Hall to ensure that this administration does not neglect communities of color. When we're seeing that the vaccinations aren't coming through to our communities, when we're not getting enough of the testing vans that come to our districts, you know, we're fighting to ensure that the minority groups of African-American, Latinos, the immigrant community is not left out. Essential workers kept this entire economy running. And the fact that we have not been able to deal with that is, to me, again, something that we cannot stand without holding this mayor accountable. And these folks that we all know from government that are coming here asking for our support, well, they need to talk about these issues that are critical for us now. If we want to get out of this wave, if Queens wants to come back, the only way to do that is when we start holding those in power accountable, including us. But I know myself, and I know that my sister, Adrienne Adams, you know, we're fighting for the resources for our community, both in Corona and in Southeast Queens. But we need everyone to come out and really show the strength and unity of Queens County. And that's with the great leadership of Congressman Meeks. You know, he came in at a tough time, but he has been doing an extraordinary job. And I'm proud to be a Democrat, and I'm proud to be a member of the Queens County Democratic Organization. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Congressman. Thank you all to my friends. As you see, my team played, we won. So, you know, I'm in good spirits today. Take care, everyone. God bless.
Thank you, Francisco. I now turn it back over to our dynamite member of our staff, working hard, getting it done. Turn it back over to Antonio so we can get to our other mayoral candidates. Antonio, you got it.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, we hear from Francisco Moya and all the other elected officials. And of course, if we're hearing from Francisco, we hear about Barcelona. But moving on, more importantly, for the sake of this evening, we are focusing on the mayor or the mayoral candidates. And now we have coming to New York from Dayton, Ohio, Our next guest was raised by his mother and grandparents and made it all the way to the top of the corporate ladder. He's also a Tri-Harvard graduate, undergrad, law, and an MBA. He's bringing his business acumen to New York City government. He's already broken barriers on Wall Street, serves on boards of hospitals and museums and nonprofits. His website also showed that he used to play basketball, so we're hoping he's rooting for the Knicks. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ray McGuire. Ray, are you with us?
Thank you for having me. I see the congressman there. Thank you for your leadership in so many ways in fighting for those who otherwise wouldn't exist. So it is great to see you and all the leadership here. An extraordinary gathering. I'm honored to be here. I heard a little bit about the introduction. You know, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why I have decided to do this, what I've done, and the vision that I have for New York City. I think there's some reference to Dayton, Ohio. I grew up on the other side of the tracks in Dayton, Ohio. I was raised by my single mother. I didn't know my dad, and my single mother raised, along with my grandparents, me and my two older brothers. At any point in time, we had half a dozen or so foster children in our home. My mother was a social worker. And so when you live in those circumstances, you know what it is like not to have any money. And so my mother often had to debate whether or not she was going to put food on the table, or not she was going to pay the gas and utility bill at Dayton Power and Light, or whether or not she was going to put tithes and offering in the church. And I know what it's like to wash tin foil. I know what it's like to, when you get to the end of the bars of soap that you put them all together, to convince yourself you got a full bar of soap. I know what it's like to grow up across the street from the Howard paper mill that sometimes used to emit fumes that were so strong that the only way that we could breathe was to open the refrigerator door. And so I know what it's like not to have. I know what it's like to have an education, which is the sacrifice that my mother made for me and my brothers. I'm the only one to have gone to college. And I think about those sacrifices, and I think about what happened to me in the 6th grade when there was a teacher who talked to my mother and said, you know, I think he's got some talents here. And there's a school that is being formed in the suburbs. And so that meant I had to walk 3/4 of a mile to a mile to get to a corner where a bus picked me up coming from the north of town, take me to the south of town. And I went to this school from 6th grade to 11th grade, and I was on scholarship every step of the way. And then 11th grade, I had a 4.0 average. I averaged 28 points per game playing basketball, and I was president of the school. And there was a teacher there who said, you know, Ray, if you're as good as they say you are, why don't you go test yourself against the big girls and boys in the East? I said, okay, Miss Melnick, where are they? And so I took a Greyhound bus around New England by myself at 16, looking for schools. And I landed at a school in Connecticut and went to that school called the Hotchkiss School. And I applied to colleges and was able to get into Harvard College and went on to Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. And so when I came to New York, I had 3 things. I had a great education, I had a lot of debt, and I had no money. And so New York City has been good to me. It is where I met my lovely better 3/4 wife, Crystal, and where we are raising our 3 children. We have an 8-year-old, Leo. We have an 18-year-old, Ella. And our 20-year-old, Cole, was drafted in the first round of the NBA draft and now is a starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. And so this city has been good to me, and I love this city. And I now look at this city and what it gave to me. Taking my foundation, I guess that's what they now call my lived experiences. And I take what I've been able to do here in business for 4 decades. And in those 4 decades, I've been able to lead and to build. I've managed budgets, sometimes bigger than state budgets. I've had to manage at least 50 budgets. And in managing those budgets, I've had to recruit and retain at the bottom of the financial crisis, the great financial crisis. I've had to recruit and retain the best talent. And while I've been in my position, I have been the longest standing head of my business in the history of Wall Street. And along the way, I have had to break down doors because traditionally there were not people who looked like me in the rooms, in the boardrooms, in the C-suites. And so I've had to do that. And along the way, I've made certain that others, those young men and women who had the skills and who needed the training could get trained. And I've invested in those young Black and brown men and women entrepreneurs and given them capital and made certain that they did for me what others like Franklin Thomas and Vernon Jordan and Greg Meeks have done for me. I wanted to do for them. I wanted to extend that ladder. And I recognize that the way to do this is, one, to be by example and to perform, and the other is to make certain we spent time. And so I'm so proud of those people, those younger people. I'm so proud of the investments that we're able to make for those entrepreneurs so they would get the opportunity. And today, as I look at this, if I take my lived experiences, if I take what I've been able to do in business with a track record in business for 40 years, and I take the relationships that I've been able to develop over that period of time, that is going to be necessary in a city today that is broke, it's broken and divided. We need all these relationships and we need to come together. And so if I take all of that and take the fact that I'm unbought and maybe I unbossed a little bit, Shirley Chisholm says, I got my better 3/4, so I got to edit the boss part. But I say that to say I haven't been termed out. I'm not looking for a promotion. I don't owe anybody anything. And so I come to this with a singular focus of what's best for New Yorkers, and especially those young people and some older people who look like me. And it's about giving the opportunity. And today we're facing 3 existential crises all at once. It's the crisis of COVID. It's the crisis of the economy. And it's the crisis of racial and religious segregation that has been so devastating to our communities. And we need to come together. And so the vision that I have for this great city is included in the 3 pillars that I have. And that is the economy. No jobs, no jobs, no city, no jobs, no dignity. And last week I outlined my plan for what's included in that. And just to go through that in some small detail, go big, go small, go forward. And what do I intend to do? I intend to create 500,000 jobs. 500,000 jobs, half of which are going to go to small businesses, because the small businesses, as you all know, are responsible for 50% of the employees in the city. And right now, those small businesses are struggling. 1 out of 3 is down. So what do I intend to do in my economic recovery, which is the greatest, most inclusive economic recovery in the history of this great city? In the small businesses, I want to take 50,000 small businesses, and I want to make sure that we give 50% wage subsidy, which means we're going to pay for 50% of their wages for 1 year. Number 2, I want to make sure that they keep their sales receipts. So for 1 year, they keep their sales receipts. Number 3, I want to make sure that we extend a lifeline by investing in what I call the comeback banks in these communities, the CDFIs, and to make sure that we invest in those so they can give out. I at one point thought they were going to give out grants and low interest loans and equity capital. Today, I recognize that far too many of them have too much debt. So I want to give them grants and I want to give them equity. And I want to extend a lifeline. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that those small businesses get rent relief and they get relief with utilities. I was just out and talking to a group of small business owners, and what they tell me, they say, Ray, we pay 100 cents on the dollar to Con Edison, and we make 10 cents on the dollar. So I want to give relief to that. And I also want to make certain that they get relief when it comes to their credit scores, because that's all too important to how they exist. So go big, half of which is going to go to small businesses, which we can pay for. Go big, infrastructure. I want to focus on the infrastructure. Fractured bridges, as you all know, sewage mains. We need to repair that. Also need to make sure that we have truly affordable housing, because today we don't. You get people who are making $15,000 to $30,000 a year, lower income, who are paying 50 to 60% of the rent of their income on rent. That is not affordable housing. And so we need to address that. And we need to address infrastructure, which has to do with technology, broadband access. Today we have 1.5 million. We have a large percentage of the lowest income who don't have access to broadband. And therefore, we've created a COVID generation when it comes to education for our children. So I want to make certain that we address that and address that immediately. And I also want to make certain that we address the culturals, because they're so important. 66 million tourists create enormous amounts of revenue, both within Manhattan and in the outer boroughs, which are so vital to what we do here. So that's my economic plan, which is critical to our comeback, and it has to be inclusive. And why do I say inclusive? Because all too often, people in the communities, Black and brown people, have been given crumbs in order to make them feel like they're full. I'm not interested in the crumbs. Matter of fact, I'm not interested in the cake. I'm interested in us owning the bakeries. That's what we have to do. And so from the economy, I want to go to safety, security, and quality of life. And quality of life means that that's the North Star. If we have quality of life, then each of us can experience the New York that we love so deeply. Without that, we can't. And we're going to suffer the migration out. So I want to fix quality of life. I want to focus on making certain that what I call RAP, the culture for the police, respect, accountability, and proportionality. Respect, we no longer have that respect. It's too divisive. Accountability, we now have the accountability database, but we pay $200 million a year for the serial abusers, $200 million a year. So under my administration, I want to make certain that we hold those people, the serial abusers, accountable. Because once we demonstrate that we're holding them accountable, then the people in the community will begin to believe that the police are there to make certain that they're okay. I'm not for defund. I'm not for defund. I'm for better policing. I'm for reallocating the budget. And proportionality, it has been said that if the only thing that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And in many of our communities, Black and brown especially, it's a sledgehammer. And so we have to deal with each other with proportionality. My reallocation of the budget goes to things like mental health care professionals. 4 out of 10 calls that go to 9/11 have to do with mental health. We need to invest in mental health care professionals. We also need to invest in the community organizations. When I grew up, I went to the community center. That kept me out of trouble. We need to invest in the community organizations. And we also need to invest in those violence interrupters. You know them well. Many of them exist in your communities. And so we need to invest there so they can prevent the crimes and so they can intercede. So it's respect, accountability, and proportionality, and also making certain that we get jobs into the community so we can prevent a lot of the unrest that is causing the question that we have in quality of life. And then finally, I want to address education. Education, my platform is cradle to career, cradle to grave, or cradle to job. And what do I mean by that? Pre-K is good, but often by the time our kid arrive at pre-K, too many of them are behind. So I want to start at zero. I want to make certain that we give the appropriate care for the toddlers and appropriate care for the mothers. And I want to make certain those caregivers are paid at the right wage. And then I want to make certain that by the end of the 3rd grade, our children know how to read, that they learn to read. Zero, because the data has shown us that between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. And after that, they're reading to learn. There's no system that we've come up with, given all these inequities, to remediate. So we have to teach them how to learn how to read. And that's from my account. By the end of the 3rd grade, every child in New York City can read. And then I want to begin at the 6th grade to make sure that every child has got exposure to whatever they want to do, become a programmer, become a coder, become a welder, become a mechanic. And I want to give them summer jobs, public-private partnerships for summer jobs, so that by the time they graduate, they can either get a job, get a career, or go to a 2 or 4-year college. So that's my vision for New York City. We can get this done. We can get this done. I'm unbossed. I don't owe anybody anything. So my sole focus is on what's best for New York City. And that's why I'm running for mayor. That's a little bit about who I am, what I've done, why I'm doing this, and the vision I have for New York. And one last thing, people ask me, how is it that you got to this place, Ray? And I tell them there are 4 things that got me here. Prayer, because this has been a walk of faith. Preparation, I know what it's like not to be prepared. Performance, I couldn't have lasted for as long as I've lasted, especially looking like me if I hadn't performed. And when you grow up in the neighborhood, you got to have a little paranoia just to make certain you remain sharp and don't believe the hype. And that's what I've done. And that's the blessing by which I come to you. I thank you for the audience, and I'm prepared to answer any questions. Thank you for the importance of this demographic to what takes place in New York City. You're essential to it, and you're essential to me and my vision.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was extremely thorough. We have been asking all the candidates 2 short follow-up questions. Now with a new president, everybody's focused on the first 100 days of his administration. So kind of using the same concept, if you can summarize very quickly what your #1 priority in those 100 days for your administration, what would that look like?
And my #1 priority is the economy. It's jobs. No jobs, no dignity, no jobs, no city. Martin Luther King Jr. says, what good does it do? What good does it do a person if he can sit at the counter, get the right to sit at the counter, but can't order a hamburger? I'm not interested. I want to maintain the ability to sit at the counter. And yes, I want to be able to order the hamburger, but I'm interested in us owning the restaurant. That is my goal. And what I intend to do in my greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this city is to make certain that by the end, that everybody's got a job and people can have been included. Because up to now, we haven't been included. And I know how to do that given the relationships that I have, given the relationships I've been able to develop. I can build a public-private partnership and I can manage and lead this city in such a way that we can make certain that what hasn't happened in the past, I can make sure it's going to happen in the future, given my relationships, my experience, and how I grew up, recognizing what's necessary to get to this point.
Fantastic. And one last question. I always find this is now a bit of a personal statement, but I always find that food is the great equalizer of all things. So what's your favorite restaurant in New York City?
My favorite restaurant in New York City, I would probably say in New York City, either Melba's or Red Rooster. Now, those things give me challenges because that cornbread and those collards and that fried bird can, I'm glad I'm healthy enough to be able to do that, but that stuff, and then you get to them sweet potatoes and then black eyed peas. I mean, that stuff is, that stuff you're only supposed to have once a year. But when I go to one of those places, it's kind of hard. You know what I mean? So
I definitely know what you mean. I've been blaming it on the quarantine weight, but people who know me better know otherwise. Ray, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. The night cannot be made without the candidates, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and a lot of respect for this club. Many of the leaders on my team are from your geography, so I got a lot of respect for them, and they're leading the way. So thank you for all that you do, and Congressman, thank you for your leadership. It is exemplary, and it's on your shoulders that we stand. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you, and a round of applause. So moving on, I do want to introduce our next and final guest for the evening. She hails all the way from DeKalb Avenue in Brooklyn and is the daughter of Puerto Rican parents. She's yet another incredibly well-educated candidate, graduating from Stuyvesant, Harvard, and Columbia diplomas, all hanging on her wall. And she has worked in education and nonprofits, leading both sectors. She states that her candidacy is grounded in the notion that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I present to you Diane Morales. Diane, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I am here. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm deeply appreciative and grateful to be here with all of you. As mentioned, my name is Diane Morales. I'm from New York City. I taught here, I've raised my family here, and I've been an organizer right here in this city. I've also had over 25 years of experience in helping New Yorkers overcome barriers to access and opportunity. Through all of this, I've experienced failed systems, but most importantly for me, I've experienced the hope of our communities. And it's that combination that led me to enter this race. The city is a part of who I am. That's why I actually stopped campaigning last spring when the pandemic hit, and I became a lead organizer for mutual aid to help support my community and all of those who continue to struggle, even now, to put food on the table. And as we watched Wall Street and the stock market get stronger, our already weakened systems created an even deeper inequity within our schools, within our health facilities, and in our neighborhoods. I don't think the problem is money. Our city has resources. I think the problem is our priorities. How administration after administration, out of touch with our communities, has continued to fail to address the root causes of the barriers that so many of us face towards living a dignified life. The answer isn't just to throw money at the fire or to build around it. The next mayor of New York City has to have a clear vision for defending and protecting human rights, the rights of Black and Brown communities, the rights of immigrant communities, the rights of our LGBT communities and our working class. This means protecting the livelihood of all New Yorkers, including providing housing, transportation, and education. And if anybody should have access to quality supports and services, it should first be those who have kept our city operating in the midst of multiple pandemics and have made it possible for so many of us to work safely from home. I believe that we need a new paradigm, one that will prioritize communities that are most in need, stabilize the livelihoods of our neighbors, especially our essential workers, our frontline workers, and our small businesses, and radicalize our approach to addressing the needs of the majority of New Yorkers. I'm a first-generation Puerto Rican, born and raised in Bed-Stuy, to a working class family. My dad worked was a union member who worked on the waterfront in what is now called Dumbo. But I'm also the single mother of 2 children. I've been fortunate enough to be a successful executive and a leader of human service organizations that have been dedicated to helping others navigate challenges of access and opportunity so that they can live in dignity. And I did that at the same time that I was navigating my own challenges with my children in special ed services and the New York City Department of Education, with my daughter who has struggled with mental health challenges, and with my son who was racially profiled 50 yards away from our front door at the age of 10. I have been able to successfully throughout my career contribute to the community. I've co-founded a national organization that's now celebrating 27 years in early literacy for preschool students. I've developed national legislation that made it possible for college students to access AmeriCorps, college students who were on work study specifically. In New York, I was privileged enough to serve as the executive director of The Door, which I actually went to for services as a young adult myself. And I was proud to be able to stand in front of the young people and say to them, I was you and you can be me. Most recently, in my position in the South Bronx for almost a decade, I was responsible for managing multi-million-dollar budgets where our reimbursement was 80 cents on the dollar. And I think that's an important thing to emphasize. I say that because if you can figure out how to close the deficit in a budget like that while also growing the organization, that is the kind of skill that I think we need to move New York City forward. I've also served on the
Diane, we've lost you for a second there. Seem to have frozen on us. Seems like we've lost Diane. Looks like some technical difficulties perhaps on her end. We'll give it a couple more minutes. Hopefully she can sign back on. In the meantime, Chairman, do you have any other words that you'd like to lead us with?
Let me say this, because we're close to 7 o'clock and hopefully she can come on and wrap up. I just want to say to my fellow,
I'm back.
She's back. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
Floor is yours, Diane, go.
Yeah, sorry. I'm technical difficulties. Hopefully you can all relate on some level, though maybe not too much. I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. In any event, I was talking about having also served on the ground after Hurricane Maria and helping to establish the Fundación de Mujeres from Puerto Rico, which actually elevates and supports women's leadership and representation in Puerto Rico's rebuilding efforts. You know, I believe that we're at a crossroads here. What we've seen over the last year, we cannot unsee. There's been a disruption in the status quo and in the normal that has laid bare so many inequities and injustices in our systems. And I think it's an opportunity for us to make a moral and a political commitment that we're not going back, that we are going to commit to creating new systems and structures and a new kind of leadership that will take us in a new direction. I'm here not because I want to get us back to the status quo. I'm running for mayor because I think that we can create a new New York City, one that we've never experienced before, but one that we all deserve. and one that finally can live up to the rhetoric of being the greatest city in the world. So I'll stop there. Thank you. I'm so sorry about that.
That's all right. This new Zoom world is always a weird one. I think humans were, what, 10,000 years of evolution didn't bring us to Zoom era yet.
Yeah.
But Diane, thank you for joining us. We do have a couple of follow-up questions that we've been asking pretty much everybody.
Okay.
It's a big job. Everybody that is vying for the mayoralty has to have at least some priorities, some number one priorities that right out the gate they want to tackle. So what would yours be in the simplest way that you can make it?
I guess I would say that my first priority would be to reallocate our dollars, the dollars that the city does have control over and does have access to immediately, so that we prioritize and center our communities first, so that we move away from profit-driven housing, profit-driven education, profit-driven models, and instead invest in our communities first, providing housing and also focusing on a people's recovery, a real people's recovery that invests in our small and mid-sized businesses and our local communities.
Fantastic.
That's the simplest way I can say it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We appreciate it. One last question. We always like to get to know our candidates on a more personal level. The job is big. It's quite stressful, as I think everybody understands. But how do you manage stress? What is your go-to de-stressor? Give us some advice.
So I do a little bit of a practice that involves some meditation and actually sort of two sides of the spectrum, some meditation and some hardcore cardio work. That's what sort of takes me out of my body, out of my mind, and helps me relieve some stress.
That sounds much better than my marathons of video games. But Diane, thank you so much again. Everybody, please give a round of applause to Diane.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you. So that's really all it, folks. We hope tonight's forum has helped you get to know these candidates a little bit better, both on a policy and personal level. We've heard from absolutely incredible leaders with more diplomas than we can possibly count, and hailing from almost every corner of this city. Hopefully you now have a slightly better sense of how you might be ranking your ballots in June. Do keep in mind it is ranked choice voting now. It's been a long night, so we thank each of you for first joining and for staying on the call the entire time. It has been a couple of almost exactly 2 hours, actually. If for whatever reason you've missed any part of the event or wish you can maybe refer back to something a candidate said, then stay tuned. We're going to be posting a recording of tonight's event online. We'll be sending out that link once it's available. Thank you again, but I don't want to have the last words. Chairman, I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Antonio. But I really want to thank you for all of the hard work you did in putting this together. This has been superb. And I really want to thank all of you, all of the district leaders and the state committee folks and our elected officials. When I think about it, we come from different, neighborhoods in Queens, and that's what's great about Queens. And some of us are more progressive than others. Some are more conservative than others. Some speak multiple languages. We have different religions, different ethnicities, but yet we come together. And that doesn't mean that we're going to agree on everything all of the time. But it means that we understand that if we're one Queens and based upon the sacrifice and the agreements that we make among ourselves, we make Queens better for each and every one of us. I am so tremendously proud, and I say this all the time because I really am, and I say it to my colleagues here in Washington, D.C. I say it when I talk to the other county leaders. I say it when I talk to my speaker. I am proud to be from Queens because I'm proud of each and every one of you. We will do this with our comptroller candidates, and my phone was burning up from Mr. Yang, so we will try to do an abbreviated one with him, giving him an audience of us from Queens County also, because we want to know all of the candidates that are running. So have a good night, stay safe, Stay healthy until we see and get to each other again. Thank you all. Have a good night.